The plasma bolt missed Jake Morrison by inches, scorching the wheat behind him. He dove behind his harvester as two massive shapes plummeted from the sky, trailing smoke and fire. The first dragon, scales gleaming copper in the afternoon sun, crashed through his barn with a sound like thunder. The second, smaller and silver, slammed into the irrigation pond, sending a geyser of water 50 feet high. Jake's heart hammered as he sprinted toward the barn, shotgun in hand. Not that buckshot would do much against whatever shot them down, but it was all he had. The Empire had been fighting the Draconian Alliance for 3 years now, and his farm sat right under one of their flight paths. He'd always known this day might come. The copper dragon lay in the ruins of his barn, one wing bent at an impossible angle. Blood, darker than human blood, and somehow luminescent, pooled beneath its massive body. Its golden eyes tracked Jake as he approached, pupils narrowing to slits. The creature was easily 40 feet long, its chest heaving with labored breaths. Jake raised his hand slowly. He'd seen the documentaries. Dragons were sentient, intelligent, allies of humanity against the Empire's expansion. This one could probably speak better English than half his neighbors. "Easy there," Jake said softly. "I'm not your enemy." The dragon's jaw opened slightly, revealing teeth like cavalry sabers. "The pilot," it rasped, its voice like gravel sliding down a metal chute. "In the pond. She cannot swim in this gravity." Jake turned and ran. The silver dragon in the pond wasn't moving, half submerged in the murky water. He splashed in without thinking, the cold shocking his system. Up close, he could see this one was smaller, maybe 20 feet, with delicate features and lighter bone structure. A flight harness was strapped to her back, standard military issue. He grabbed the harness and pulled, his boots finding purchase in the pond's muddy bottom. The dragon was heavy, impossibly heavy, but adrenaline gave him strength he didn't know he had. Inch by inch, he dragged her toward the shore. Her eyes were closed, water streaming from her nostrils. As he finally hauled her onto the grass, the copper dragon called out again, weaker this time. Pressure point, base of the neck, both sides. "Press hard." Jake found the spots, scaled ridges just behind her jaw, and pressed his thumbs in deep. The silver dragon convulsed once, then coughed up a stream of water. Her eyes opened, brilliant blue and confused. "You're safe," Jake told her. "You're on my farm. You're safe." Above them, more plasma bolts streaked across the sky. Whatever had shot them down was still out there, and Jake had a feeling his quiet farming days were about to end permanently. The silver dragon, still coughing, tried to stand but collapsed immediately. Her right rear leg was twisted, bone visible through torn scales. Jake had grown up on this farm, had dealt with injured livestock his whole life, but nothing had prepared him for this. The copper dragon in the barn groaned, a sound that made Jake's teeth ache. "Can you move?" Jake asked the silver dragon. She shook her head weakly. "My name is Vera, that is, Commander Kade. We were on reconnaissance when their stealth frigate ambushed us. You should run, human. When they realize we survived, they will come to finish the task. Name's Jake, and I'm not running from my own land." He looked at the barn, then at the house. "I've got a root cellar. Stone walls, 3 feet thick. My grandfather built it to survive tornadoes. Think you two can fit?" Vera's laugh was bitter. "I weigh 1,400 pounds. Cade weighs 3,000. You cannot move us." "Watch me." Jake ran to his equipment shed and fired up the big tractor, the one with the front loader he used for moving hay bales. He drove it to the barn first, where Cade lay among splintered wood. The dragon's breathing had become shallow, and his eyes were glazing. "This is going to hurt," Jake warned. "Everything already hurts," Cade muttered. "Do what you must." Jake positioned the loader bucket beside the dragon, then grabbed every blanket and tarp he could find. He created a makeshift sling, working it under Cade's body, inch by agonizing inch. The dragon helped where he could, using his good wing to shift his weight. It took 20 minutes, but finally Jake had him secured enough to lift. The tractor's engine screamed in protest as Jake raised the loader. Hydraulic fluid leaked from a stressed line, but it held. He drove slowly toward the house, every bump making Cade groan. The root cellar doors were built into a small hill behind the house, angled iron doors that led down into the earth. Jake lowered Cade as gently as possible onto the sloped entrance, then used chains to drag him down the stone steps. The dragon barely fit through the doorway, his wings scraping both sides. Inside, the cellar stretched 20 feet long and 12 feet wide, filled with shelves of canned goods and emergency supplies. "Stay here," Jake told Cadet. "I'll get Vera." The return trip took less time. Vera was smaller, lighter, and conscious enough to help. She wrapped her forelegs around the bucket's edge as Jake lifted her. When he lowered her into the cellar beside Cade, she curled protectively against the larger dragon's side. Jake was climbing back up the steps when he heard it, the high-pitched whine of Empire engines getting closer. He grabbed the cellar doors and was about to slam them shut when Vera called out, "Wait. The plasma scoring on the ground are blood trail. They will see everything." She was right. The evidence of the crash was everywhere. Jake thought fast. He ran to his fuel tanks and opened the valves, letting diesel pour across the barn ruins and the blood-soaked ground. He grabbed a flare from his truck, struck it, and threw. The fuel ignited with a whoosh that singed his eyebrows. Within seconds, the barn was an inferno, black smoke billowing into the sky. Jake scattered hay bales around, making it look like an accident, then sprinted back to the cellar and pulled the doors shut above him. Darkness swallowed them. Jake fumbled for the emergency lantern he kept down here and clicked it on. In the dim LED glow, Cade and Vera looked worse than before. Both dragons were shaking. Whether from pain or shock, Jake couldn't tell. The engine sound grew louder, directly overhead now. Through the crack between the cellar doors, Jake could see a shadow pass across the burning barn. The Empire vessel hovered there for what felt like an eternity. Jake held his breath, praying they'd assumed the dragons had burned in the crash. Finally, mercifully, the engine sound faded. Jake let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "They're gone. For now," Cade said weakly. "But they will return. They always do. You have condemned yourself by helping us, human." "Jake," he corrected. "And I made my choice. Now let's figure out how to keep you two alive." He examined their wounds more closely in the lantern light. Cade's wing was definitely broken, multiple fractures by the look of it. The plasma burn along his side was deep, still smoldering at the edges. Vera's leg was shattered, and she had a gash across her chest that wept luminescent blood. "I've got medical supplies," Jake said. "Not dragon medical supplies, but basics. Antibiotics, bandages, painkillers." "Our physiology is similar enough to yours," Vera said through gritted teeth. "But we need something you cannot provide. Dragon-scale regeneration requires specific minerals. Titanium, platinum, trace amounts of yttrium. Without them, these wounds will never properly heal." Jake sat back on his heels, thinking. His farm was isolated, 20 miles from the nearest town. The Empire would be watching for any sign of the dragons. He had 2 critically injured beings in his cellar, a burned barn, and no plan. But as he looked at Cade and Vera, saw the trust in their eyes despite everything, Jake knew one thing for certain. He'd figure this out. Farmers were good at making do with what they had, and he'd be damned if he'd let these 2 die on his land. "Stay quiet," Jake said, climbing the cellar steps. "I'll be back." He emerged into the acrid smoke still drifting from the barn ruins. The fire had done its job, destroying most of the evidence, but Jake knew better than to assume they were safe. He needed those minerals, and he needed them fast. His workshop. Jake jogged to the metal building he used for equipment repair. Inside, among the welding supplies and spare parts, he found what he was looking for. Old catalytic converters from scrapped vehicles contained platinum and palladium. The titanium was harder, but he remembered the crashed survey drone he'd found last year in the back 40. He'd kept it, planning to sell the parts someday. Jake gathered everything, including his angle grinder and safety gear. Back in the cellar, he explained his plan. "Catalytic converters?" Cade coughed, a wet sound that worried Jake. "You would grind down automotive parts to extract trace minerals? Unless you've got a better idea." Vera's eyes brightened despite her pain. "It might work. We only need small amounts mixed with water to form a paste. Applied directly to the wounds, it jumpstarts the regeneration process. Jake set up the grinder on the cellar floor, working carefully to collect the powder in a metal pan. The noise was deafening in the confined space, and he worried it might attract attention, but he had no choice. After 30 minutes, he had a decent amount of platinum-rich powder. The titanium from the drone took longer, the metal tougher than he expected. While he worked, Vera told him about the war. The Empire had started expanding 5 years ago, claiming empty systems at first, then moving into occupied space. They viewed dragons as animals, despite clear evidence of their intelligence. Humanity had allied with the Draconian Alliance 3 years back, much to the Empire's fury. "We thought this sector was secure," Vera said. "But they've developed new stealth technology, ships that can hide even from our sensors." Jake mixed the metallic powders with distilled water from his emergency supplies, creating a thick, silvery paste. "This is going to feel weird," he warned Cadet. The big dragon nodded. Jake spread the paste across the plasma burn, working it into the charred scales. Cade's entire body went rigid, his claws gouging furrows in the stone floor. Then, incredibly, the wound began to change. The blackened edges took on a metallic sheen, new scales forming like crystals growing in fast motion. "It's working," Jake breathed. He treated Vera next, packing the paste around her broken leg and chest wound. Her reaction was similar, a full body shudder followed by visible healing. It wasn't instant, nothing like in the movies, but it was happening. The luminescent blood stopped flowing, and the exposed bone began to knit together. "You have saved our lives," Cade said solemnly. "This is a debt we cannot easily repay. Just get better. We can worry about debts later." Jake spent the next hours monitoring them, changing bandages, offering water. Dragons, it turned out, could drink regular water just fine, though they preferred it cold. He made trips to his well, hauling buckets down the cellar steps. As night fell, exhaustion hit him like a hammer. "Sleep," Vera insisted. "We will wake you if danger comes." Jake didn't argue. He curled up in the corner on a pile of old blankets, the shotgun within arm's reach. His last thought before sleep took him was how surreal this all was. Yesterday, his biggest concern had been whether to plant soybeans or corn in the north field. He woke to Cade's urgent whisper. "Jake, they have returned." Dawn light filtered through the cellar door cracks. Jake crept up the steps and peered out. 3 Empire soldiers in powered armor were examining the barn ruins, scanning for heat signatures and biological traces. One of them kicked at the charred wood, clearly suspicious. Jake's blood ran cold. They were thorough, professional. These weren't regular troops. They were hunters, and they wouldn't leave without answers. "We need a distraction," Jake whispered down to the dragons. "We cannot fight in our condition," Cade replied. "And you cannot face them alone." Jake thought fast. His farm had one advantage. He knew every inch of it. The drainage culvert that ran under the access road, the old mine shaft on the property's edge, the dense woods to the north. He could use the terrain. "I'm not going to fight them," Jake said. "I'm going to lead them away." Before anyone could argue, he slipped out of the cellar and circled wide through his wheat field, keeping low. He reached his truck, parked near the equipment shed, and hot-wired the ignition to bypass the keyless start. The engine roared to life. The Empire soldier's head snapped toward the sound. Jake floored it, tires kicking up gravel as he shot down the access road. Plasma bolts stitched the ground behind him, superheating dirt into glass. One bolt clipped his rear bumper, and the truck fishtailed wildly. Jake fought for control, steering toward the woods. The soldiers were following, their armor's jump jets allowing them to keep pace. Perfect. He led them deeper into the forest, where the thick canopy would limit their aerial advantage. The truck crashed through underbrush, branches scraping the sides. Jake saw the culvert ahead and made his decision. He jumped out while the truck was still moving, tucking and rolling behind a fallen log. The driverless truck plunged into the culvert with a tremendous splash, water erupting like a geyser. The soldiers converged on the crash site. Jake held his breath, watching them search the wreckage. One of them barked orders in a language Jake didn't recognize. They seemed convinced he'd drowned, swept away by the current. After 10 agonizing minutes, they withdrew, flying back toward their ship. Jake waited another 30 minutes before moving, making sure they were truly gone. His body ached from the jump, his shoulder probably dislocated, but he'd done it. He'd bought them time. The walk back to the farm took an hour. When he finally descended into the cellar, both dragons were watching him with expressions he couldn't quite read. "That was foolish," Vera said softly. "That was brave," Cade corrected. Jake collapsed against the wall, pain finally catching up to him. "That was necessary." Vera examined Jake's shoulder with surprising gentleness for a creature with claws. "Dislocated. I can fix it, but it will hurt." "Everything hurts already," Jake said, echoing Cade's earlier words. "Do it." The dragon positioned herself carefully, using her good foreleg to grip Jake's arm. One quick, precise movement, and the joint popped back into place. Jake bit back a scream, stars exploding across his vision. "You learned field medicine in the military?" he gasped. "I was a combat medic before I became a pilot," Vera said. "Dragons live long lives. We have time for many careers." Over the next 3 days, an uneasy routine developed. Jake ventured out only when necessary, gathering supplies and checking for Empire activity. The metallic paste continued to work miracles on the dragon's wounds. Cade's wing, though still tender, could flex without grinding sounds. Vera's leg bore weight again, though she limped heavily. On the 4th night, everything changed. Jake was asleep when the proximity alarm on his property line went off. He'd rigged it years ago to warn of coyotes, but this was different. Multiple contacts moving fast. "Company," he announced, grabbing the shotgun. "How many?" Cade asked, already struggling to his feet. Jake checked the monitor he'd brought down to the cellar. 6 contacts, coming from 3 directions. "A kill team," Vera said grimly. "They know we survived. They're coming to finish us and eliminate any witnesses." Jake's mind raced. The cellar was a dead end. If the Empire found them here, they'd be trapped. But the dragons still couldn't fly, couldn't fight effectively. He looked at his property map, an idea forming, the old mine shaft. "It's been sealed for 50 years, but I know a way in. It connects to a whole network of tunnels under the property. We could hide there and maybe find another way out." "Can you guide us in the dark?" Cade asked. "I grew up exploring those tunnels. I know them better than my own house." They moved fast, Jake leading with a flashlight while the dragons followed, as quietly as 3,000 and 1,400-pound creatures could. The mine entrance was hidden behind a collapsed section of his fence, overgrown with vines. Jake tore away the vegetation, revealing rusted steel doors. The lock had corroded decades ago. Jake kicked it open, and they descended into darkness that smelled of earth and old timber. Behind them, they heard shouts. The Empire team had reached the farm. The tunnels were exactly as Jake remembered. A maze of passages carved by miners looking for silver that never materialized. He led the dragons deeper, away from the entrance, his flashlight beam cutting through the absolute darkness. "They will have thermal imaging," Vera whispered. "They will track our heat signatures." "Not down here," Jake said. "These tunnels run through an underground river system. The temperature differential should mask us, at least for a while." They came to a cavern where water dripped from stalactites, forming a shallow pool. Jake had the dragons wade through, the cold water helping to disperse their heat signatures. Behind them, lights bobbed at the tunnel entrance. The Empire team had found their trail. "Keep moving," Jake urged. They pushed deeper into the network, taking turns at random to confuse pursuit. Jake's knowledge of the tunnels was the only thing keeping them ahead. He led them through passages so narrow the dragons had to squeeze through sideways, their scales scraping stone. In one cavern they stopped to rest. Cade's breathing had become labored again, the exertion taxing his healing body. Vera kept watch at the passage entrance. Her eyes adapted to the darkness better than Jake's. "I need to ask you something," Jake said quietly to Cade. "Why did the Empire shoot you down? What were you really doing in this sector?" Cade was silent for a long moment. "We were mapping their stealth ship patrol routes, Intelligence believes they're preparing for a major offensive. If we can predict their movements, we can warn the fleet, potentially save thousands of lives. Did you get the data out before you crashed? No. It's still in my neural recorder. If the Empire captures me, they'll extract it and know we're on to them. Jake understood then. This wasn't just about saving 2 lives. The information Cade carried could change the course of the war. No wonder the Empire was so determined to find them. Then we make sure they don't catch you, Jake said simply. A sound echoed through the tunnels. Footsteps, multiple sets, getting closer. The Empire team was converging on their position. Jake looked around frantically. This cavern had 3 exits, but he could hear movement from 2 of them. They were being herded. The water, Vera said suddenly. Where does it go? Jake looked at the pool they'd waded through. It fed into a narrow channel that disappeared into the rock. He'd never followed it as a kid, too scared of getting stuck. But now it might be their only option. I don't know. It could lead outside, or it could dead end at 100 feet. Better than certain capture, Cade said. The dragons slipped into the water, submerging as much as their bodies would allow. Jake went first, diving into the channel. The current pulled him immediately, tumbling him through darkness. He fought panic, trusting the water to carry him somewhere, anywhere. The channel twisted and dropped, became a subterranean waterfall that sent Jake plummeting into a deep pool. He surfaced, gasping, in a cavern lit by cracks in the ceiling where moonlight filtered through. Behind him, first Vera, then Katie emerged, coughing and disoriented. They'd made it. And more importantly, Jake realized, looking up at those cracks, they'd found a way out. The cavern ceiling had partially collapsed, creating a rough chimney leading to the surface. It would be a difficult climb, especially for injured dragons, but it was possible. Can you climb? Jake asked. Cade tested his wing, extending it carefully. I believe so. The regeneration paste has done its work. We are not at full strength, but we are far from helpless. Above them, they heard the Empire team searching the tunnels, their frustrated shouts echoing through the stone. They'd lost the trail at the water channel, bought Jake and the dragons precious time. Then let's get you home, Jake said, beginning the climb. The ascent took 2 hours. Jake went first, finding handholds in the crumbling rock, testing each one before trusting his weight to it. The dragons followed, using their claws to grip the stone, their partially healed wings providing balance. Twice, sections of the wall gave way, sending rocks tumbling into the pool below. Each time, Jake's heart stopped until he heard the dragons confirm they were okay. They emerged in a clearing 5 miles from Jake's farm, deep in the forest where the canopy was so thick even satellite surveillance would have trouble spotting them. The night air felt like freedom after the closed confines of the tunnels. Jake collapsed on the moss, every muscle screaming. We need to contact my unit, Vera said, already looking healthier in the fresh air. They'll be searching for us. Your comm equipment went down with the crash, Jake pointed out. Cade shifted, then did something Jake didn't expect. The big dragon opened his mouth and carefully regurgitated a small, sealed capsule. Military grade, encrypted. I swallowed it when we were hit, knowing the Empire would scan for technology. Jake couldn't help but laugh. Dragons have some interesting survival instincts. Cade's expression might have been a smile. We are nothing if not practical. The beacon activated with a soft chime. Within minutes, they had a response. Vera's unit was 30 minutes out, coming in low and fast. Jake used the time to gather branches, building a fire that would mark the landing zone. As they waited, the 3 of them sat together in comfortable silence. Jake thought about his farm probably being torn apart by Empire troops looking for evidence. He thought about his quiet life, now irrevocably changed. Somehow, he couldn't bring himself to regret any of it. What will you do now? Vera asked softly. Your home is compromised. The Empire knows you helped us. Jake had been thinking about that. I've got family in the Northern Territories. They run a ranch, could always use an extra hand. Maybe it's time for a change anyway. You're running, Cade observed. I'm surviving. There's a difference. The sound of engines approached, different from the Empire's high-pitched whine. These were deeper, more powerful. 3 Dragon-class fighter craft descended through the canopy, their pilots expert enough to navigate the tight space between trees. They landed in formation, and a hatch opened on the lead craft. A female dragon emerged larger than Cade, her scales a deep emerald. "Commander, we've been searching for 3 days." Her eyes found Jake. "And this is the human who saved you." "Captain Helena, meet Jake Morrison," Vera said formally. "Without him, we would both be dead or captured." Helena studied Jake with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "The Alliance owes you a debt. We don't forget such things." "Just doing what anyone would do," Jake said. "No," Cade corrected. "Not anyone. Most would have run, or tried to bargain with the Empire. You risked everything without hesitation. That makes you rare." 2 medic dragons were already examining Cade and Vera, scanning their wounds with sophisticated equipment. They seemed impressed by the healing, asking questions about the metallic paste treatment. Jake explained what he'd done, and the medics took notes with what looked like genuine interest. "This improvisation could save lives in the field," one medic said. "Simple materials, easily sourced. We'll test it properly, of course, but the theory is sound." Helena turned back to Jake. "We cannot leave you here. The Empire will come for you, and we cannot protect you effectively on the ground. Come with us. We have human liaisons at our forward base. You'd be safe there until we can establish permanent sanctuary for you." Jake hesitated. Leave Earth? Go into space with the dragons? It was insane. It was also his only real option if he wanted to survive. The Empire didn't forgive those who interfered with their operations. "What about my farm?" "We'll make sure it's protected," Helena promised. "And when the war ends, when it's safe, you can return. The Alliance takes care of its friends." Jake looked at Cade and Vera, the 2 dragons he'd pulled from his pond and dragged into his cellar. The beings he'd risked everything to save. They were watching him with expressions he was learning to read. Hope, gratitude, and something else. Respect, maybe. Or friendship. "All right," Jake said. "I'll come with you." The loading process was efficient. They secured Cade and Vera in medical cradles inside the lead craft. Jake was given a seat in the same ship, strapped in beside a communications officer who introduced himself as Lieutenant Craig Stevens. "First time in a dragon fighter?" Craig asked with a grin. "First time off the ground in anything," Jake admitted. The engines roared to life. Through the viewport, Jake watched the forest drop away. Then the clouds. Then the curve of Earth itself. His farm was a tiny speck below, growing smaller. Everything he'd known left behind. But as the stars came into view, brilliant and close, Jake felt something unexpected. Excitement. The war was far from over. The Empire would keep pushing, keep hunting. But Jake had discovered something about himself in these past days. He was braver than he thought. More resourceful. More willing to stand up for what was right, regardless of the cost. Cade's voice came through the comm system. "Thank you, Jake Morrison, for my life, for Vera's life, and for showing us that courage exists in the most unexpected places." "You're welcome," Jake said simply. "Both of you." As the dragon fighter accelerated toward the fleet, leaving Earth behind, Jake allowed himself a small smile. He'd started the week as a farmer worried about crop yields. He was ending it as something else entirely. What that something was, he'd figure out as he went. But one thing was certain. His life would never be boring again. The stars ahead seemed to welcome him, and somewhere in their depths, Jake's new life was waiting. Whatever came next, whatever challenges the war brought, he'd face them the same way he'd faced everything else. With determination, ingenuity, and the kind of stubborn courage that came from working the land. He'd carried 2 wounded dragons across his field and into safety. In doing so, he'd forged a bond that would last a lifetime and change the course of his own destiny. Not bad for a simple farmer. Not bad at all.